First, I was going to ask, where'd you get the suit?
Oh.
But the other question is,
It was a gift.
Having lived through different eras that seem worse than today, from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, divisiveness was Nixon, the Vietnam.
Sorry, you have to hold it a little closer.
So from periods like the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, whether it was the Vietnam War, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Nixon getting impeached, there's been a lot of stuff that seems like it was really bad in the past. My question for you is, what makes you optimistic about today? What makes you optimistic about today? What things do you see that might be...
What am I optimistic about?
Yeah.
Oh. Hardly anyone is starving. Let's see. There's way more... Here's the thing thing I'm happiest about. There's way more fat poor people than starving poor people. Right. That's a hell of a fine accomplishment. And I don't mean that as a joke, right? I mean, the only starvation there is in the world now is it's for political reasons. We can easily feed the entire population and more than that. We're going to peak at about 9 billion. And the population is going to come down after that. And that's not going to be very long in the future. And the declining population is going to be the problem, not the increasing population. The planet is rapidly greening. That's a consequence of carbon dioxide production, which I think is insanely comical. And it's mostly happening in semi-arid areas, which is exactly the opposite of what we've been told for the last 30 years. And the data on that are crystal clear. And it turns out that's because when plants have more carbon dioxide, they can close their breathing pores, and that means they can inhabit drier areas, and so the deserts shrink, not grow. So I'm positive about that. The same thing is making crops more abundant. What else? You have like a $1 billion gadget in your pocket, right? It's a universal library. Everyone can teach themselves everything with a cell phone. So that's a complete bloody miracle. We can fly across the world for nothing. When we land, we can rent a car from someone who doesn't even know us, and they'll just give us the keys. That's quite the bloody miracle. It's like, all you have to do is look. I mean, we're so rich, it's just beyond comprehension, and we're getting richer very rapidly. And if we weren't stupid, and we are, and so we'll probably ruin it, but if we weren't stupid, that's going to get even better in the next, 20, 30 years. Bjorn Lomborg, who's someone I really admire, and he's what would you say, laid out reasonable predictions based on current growth rates into the future 100 years. We'll be 440% richer than we are now on average in 100 years, and climate change, to the degree that that's a reality, will produce a decrement in that improvement of about 40%. And so there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that if we aimed up properly and we were careful, we could have a life of unlimited abundance and opportunity for every single person on the planet. Now that would mean that we would have to be able to tolerate that, and it isn't obvious that we can, because the resentful among us would rather that they had and others didn't, so that their status remained falsely elevated. Absolutely, absolutely. And so, they're perfectly willing to sacrifice the poor to the planet. And it isn't because they want to save the planet. It's because they want to sacrifice the poor. And that we could easily go in that direction. And hey, man, we did lots of times in the 20th century, so this time we could really get it right, because we have technology that makes the Nazis look like pikers. And so if we decided to walk down the totalitarian road, we could produce a hell like nothing anyone has ever seen before. But it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And I think you might say, well, how do we stop that hell from making itself manifest? And the answer is, you undergo an internal apocalypse and dispense with all your deceit, and orient yourself properly in the world and make yourself manifest as a shining example. And if you're good enough at doing that, you'll elevate the people around you. And if enough people do that, we'll walk the right road. And so that's...
Thank you.